How far would Batman go in the boys' universe realistically? I can already imagine the comments before this video even starts. Here we go again, another video saying Batman beats everybody. Here comes the Batman fan saying he can take down any character with 2 minutes of prep time. And look, I get it, I really do. The whole Batman with prep time thing gets exaggerated like crazy. Some people talk like Batman is this unbeatable force who can walk into any universe, stare down the enemy, press one button on his belt, and solve everything in 5 seconds. But that is not the question today. The question is not simply whether Batman beats Homelander in some random fight. The question is way more interesting. How far would Batman actually go in the boys' universe, realistically? And to be completely honest, if you drop Batman right in the middle of the Seven's headquarters with no intel, no preparation, no escape route, and Homelander staring straight at him, ready to end it right there, it's over. There is not much of a debate there. Batman is incredible, but he is still human. If he gets caught completely unprepared by someone with insane strength, speed, heat vision, and absolutely no emotional control, he could be dead before he even understands what is happening. And that is the point a lot of people ignore when they defend Batman like he is immortal. He is not immortal. He does not win because he is stronger. He wins because he almost never walks into a war before turning that war into a chessboard. And that is exactly why the boys' universe would be, at the same time, one of the most dangerous places for Batman, and one of the places where he would be most effective. Because the boys is not a universe full of disciplined heroes, trained warriors, and morally prepared people carrying power responsibly. It is a universe of celebrities with superhuman abilities. It is a world where a lot of people were given strength, speed, durability, and fame, but were never given character, discipline, responsibility, or self-control. And for Batman, that changes everything, because he would not look at the Seven as some alternate version of the Justice League. He would look at them as criminals with a PR team. The first thing Batman would do would not be running around beating everybody up. That is the mistake. He would not show up in that universe screaming that he is going to take down Vought, challenge Homelander, and save the world. Batman would disappear. He would stay in the shadows. He would watch. He would figure out who gives the orders, who obeys, who is scared, who is lying, who is being manipulated, and who is the real threat. Within a few nights, he would realize that most supes in that world are not real warriors. They have powers, but they do not have discipline. They have contracts, followers, commercials, movies, licensed products, rehearsed speeches, and a corporation cleaning up the mess behind the scenes. But a lot of them have never faced someone like Batman in the dark, and that is where Batman would start moving forward. Against low-level and mid-level supes, he would probably go very far. Not because he is stronger, but because he is more prepared. A supe who relies only on brute strength, fame, and intimidation becomes easy prey for someone who has spent his life fighting unpredictable criminals, trained killers, metahumans, monsters, and master strategists. A guy with enhanced strength can be dangerous, of course, but if he does not know how to fight, if he is arrogant, if he walks into an alley thinking he is untouchable, he goes down. Batman does not need to trade clean punches with that kind of person. He uses the environment, fear, distraction, technology, precision, and information. He does not fight to prove he is stronger. He fights to end the threat. But Batman would quickly realize that the real problem is not some random supe abusing his power in a dark street. The real problem is the structure. Vought, Compound V, the marketing, the contracts, the politicians, the laboratories, the entire machine that creates, sells, protects, and turns monsters into idols. And now, in the final stage of the boys, this situation gets even worse. Because Homelander is no longer just the face of Vought. He is no longer just the famous superhero who has to smile on television while the company cleans up his crimes behind the scenes. Now he is in a much more dangerous phase. He controls the United States through fear, imprisons opponents in freedom camps, and is trying to turn the entire country into an extension of his own will. That completely changes the game, because before, Homelander's biggest weakness was his public image. He needed to be loved. He needed to be applauded. He needed people to look at him as a symbol of hope. Even though he was unstable, cruel, and narcissistic, he still depended on public approval. But when someone like him starts trading popularity for control, when he starts realizing he can rule through fear, manipulate institutions, and turn fanaticism into a political weapon, the threat is no longer just physical. Homelander stops being just a dangerous supe. He becomes a system, and Batman understands systems. Batman would not look at Season 5 Homelander as just an evil Superman. He would look at him as a mix of tyrant, lab product, cult leader, and psychological bomb waiting to explode. That is why Batman's approach would have to change. It would not be enough to expose old crimes. It would not be enough to leak Vought documents. It would not be enough to reveal that Compound V created fake heroes. Because by this point, the problem has already moved past propaganda. Now there is real power, real fear, and real control. Batman would have to take down not just the man, but the machine that allows that man to stay standing. And that is where V1 comes in. Because V1 raises the threat level. The idea of an original version of Compound V, something older, rarer, and possibly connected to an attempt to make Homelander even more resistant, maybe even harder to affect with the anti-supe virus, changes the whole question of the video. Before, the question was, could Batman stop Homelander? Now the question becomes much worse. Could Batman stop a Homelander who is trying to erase his last biological weaknesses and place himself above death itself? A lot of people would say it is over. They would say that if Homelander was already dangerous before, with V1, he becomes an impossible problem. But that is exactly where Batman becomes even more dangerous. Because to Homelander, V1 might look like divinity. It might feel like confirmation that he is superior, untouchable, above everyone else. But to Batman, V1 would not just be a power boost. It would be a clue. If there is a first version of Compound V, then there is an origin. If there is an origin, there are files. If there are files, there are tests, failures, side effects, people involved, hidden labs, old samples, and data Vought tried to bury. Homelander would look at V1 and see immortality. Batman would look at V1 and see a vulnerability waiting to be understood. That would be the most important part of the strategy. Batman would not try to fight Homelander with V1 like it was a normal battle. He would not think, now he is stronger, so I need to hit harder. No, he would think, what did this formula do to his body? What did it stabilize? What did it change? What did it make dependent? What did it make unstable? And is there a way to neutralize this effect without killing the target? Because that is the detail that separates Batman from the boys. Butcher would look at V1 and see confirmation that there is only one extreme solution. Batman would look at V1 and see an equation, and that would create a brutal conflict between Batman and Butcher. Because even though they are against the same enemy, they are not the same. Butcher wants to destroy supes. Batman wants to stop criminals. That difference may sound small, but it is massive. Batman would understand Butcher's pain. He would understand the hate. He would understand the trauma, but he would not allow that hate to become the whole plan. He would not accept a strategy that throws innocent people, non-criminal supes, and manipulated victims into the same box. To Batman, that would be unacceptable. He would go after Homelander, yes. He would go after Vought's criminals, yes. But he would also stop the boys' revenge from becoming a new tragedy. Huey might try to talk things out. Starlight would probably see Batman as a real chance to expose Vought without turning everything into a massacre. Kimiko would respect his silence and discipline. Frenchie would probably be fascinated by his technology. But Butcher would look at Batman and see a dangerous, intelligent man who is trapped by a moral code he sees as weak, and Batman would look at Butcher and see a ticking time bomb. A man who started out fighting monsters but is becoming more and more willing to become one of them in order to win. So realistically, Batman would not simply become another member of the boys. He could work with them for a while. He could exchange information, use contacts, study files, cross-reference data, and understand how Vought operates from the inside. But he would not follow Butcher as a leader. He would not accept execution as the default solution. And if Butcher crossed the line, Batman would go after him too. Because for Batman, the code does not exist only when things are easy. The code exists precisely when the world is trying to convince you that the only way out is to abandon your soul. Now, against the Seven and other supes, the situation varies a lot. Lower level supes would probably fall. The Deep, outside the right environment, would be way more vulnerable than he likes to admit. He has durability, he has strength, but emotionally, he is weak, insecure, and easy to manipulate. Batman would not need some huge battle against him. He would just need to control the environment, cut off his advantages, and exploit his psychology. A-Train would be much more dangerous because speed changes everything. If he attacked by surprise, Batman would have almost no room for error. But Batman would not schedule an open fight against a speedster. He would study patterns, physical strain, routes, dependencies, addictions, limits, and behavior. The goal would be to stop the fight from becoming a race. Black Noir would be a heavy fight. He is durable, silent, brutal, and much more dangerous than most. But even then, Batman would have the technical advantage. Noir can take a lot. Batman can read a lot. Noir moves like a weapon. Batman adapts like a surgeon. It would not be a joke. It would not be easy, but with preparation and the right equipment, Batman would probably find a way to neutralize him without having to kill him. Maeve would be different. Batman would not treat her like a common enemy. He would recognize guilt, conscience, and humanity in her. He might even try to turn her into an ally. And honestly, Maeve might be one of the few people in that universe Batman would respect, precisely because she knows Vought's rot from the inside and still has not completely erased her own conscience. But Victoria Newman, or anyone with a long-range vision-based attack, would be a whole different kind of threat. Against someone like that, physical strength does not matter. Batman would not walk into a well-lit room to make a speech. He would use cover, distractions, line-of-sight blockers, technology, public exposure, and strategic containment. Against certain powers, showing yourself in front of the enemy is already losing. So Batman would do the opposite. He would win before being seen, because Batman does not play fair against someone who can end you in a second. He plays it smart, but everything comes back to Homelander. And here we need to be honest. Homelander is not Superman. He looks like the Superman of that universe, but he does not have the same scale, the same experience, the same emotional control, or the same training. Superman grew up learning to hold back his own power so he would not destroy the world around him. Homelander grew up being worshipped, manipulated, spoiled, and feared. He is powerful, yes, ridiculously powerful within the boys' universe, but he is also emotionally unstable, vain, needy, narcissistic, and desperate to be seen as special. And for Batman, that is a massive weakness. V1 does not erase that weakness. In fact, it might expose it even more, because someone who truly believes he is a god does not need to chase a formula to make sure no one can bring him down. Someone who truly feels invincible does not need to prove it all the time. So to Batman, V1 would reveal something very important. Behind all that divine posture, Homelander is still afraid. Afraid of the virus, afraid of losing power, afraid of aging, afraid of being replaced, afraid of discovering that deep down, he is still just a product manufactured in a lab. And Batman is an expert in fear. He would not try to humiliate Homelander in a public fight right away. He would destroy his sense of control. He would make him distrust his allies. He would make Vought executives realize the monster they created can no longer be controlled. He would make politicians understand that supporting Homelander is not protection, it is a sentence. He would make the most fanatical followers see cracks in their idol's image. And above all, he would force Homelander to face the truth he hates most. He was not born a god. He was manufactured as a product. That psychological attack would be devastating, because Homelander knows how to win through fear, but he does not know how to deal with someone who refuses to bow to that fear. He is used to people trembling, obeying, flattering him, and lying to please him. Batman would do none of that. Batman would look at him the same way he looks at any dangerous criminal. Not with admiration, not with panic, but with calculation. And that might irritate Homelander more than any punch, because for someone who needs to be seen as superior, being treated like a case to be solved is humiliating. Batman's plan would have 3 layers. First, cut off the structure. There is no point attacking only Homelander if he has the government, the media, followers, loyal supes, and an entire machine spinning around him. Batman would break communications, chains of command, financial records, blackmail networks, propaganda systems, and internal alliances. He would create distrust. He would make allies protect themselves before protecting Homelander. He would force Vought into survival mode, because a criminal organization only looks united until every member realizes they might fall alone. Second, study V1. This would become Batman's scientific obsession. He would break into labs, steal samples, cross-reference old data with first-generation Compound V cases, study Soldier Boy, analyze the anti-supe virus, and try to discover whether there is a way to neutralize powers without killing. Because if there is a formula that amplifies, maybe there is a formula that destabilizes. If there is a virus that eliminates, maybe there is a modified version that only interrupts the effect. And if Soldier Boy still represents one of the few keys to removing powers, Batman would not treat him like a hero. He would treat him as a resource too dangerous to remain free, but too important to ignore. Third, emotionally isolate Homelander. And this might be the cruelest part of the plan. Batman would make Homelander feel like the world around him is shrinking. Every ally could be a traitor. Every camera could expose a weakness. Every speech could become evidence against him. Every outburst could destroy another piece of the image he is trying to maintain. And when Homelander finally rushed into a physical confrontation, Batman would try to make sure that fight happened in a place of his choosing, with traps, containment systems, escape routes, distractions, armor, sensors, technology, and some kind of answer to V1. Even then, it would be dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Batman could make a mistake. He could underestimate V1. He could lose equipment. He could be forced to retreat. He could take a loss before getting the win. That is the realistic part. Batman would not walk through this universe without suffering. He would not clean up Vought in one night. He would not bring Homelander to his knees with a pretty speech. He would have to investigate, test, fail, adapt, and attack again. Because Homelander with V1 is not just stronger. He is a political, biological, and psychological threat all at once. But Homelander would still be predictable, and that is Batman's biggest advantage. He is arrogant. He needs to be worshipped. He reacts badly when he loses control. He wants to be feared, but also loved. He wants to be seen as a god, but behaves like someone terrified of rejection. V1 might make him more durable, but it does not make him disciplined. It does not make him a strategist. It does not cure his neediness. It does not erase his vanity. It does not turn an unstable narcissist into a tactical genius. He is still a man with way too much power, surrounded by people who are too afraid to tell him the truth, and Batman destroys enemies like that. So, how far would Batman go in the boys' universe? Against lower-level supes, he would go all the way. Most of them would fall. Against members of the Seven, he would struggle, but with information and preparation, he would have a real shot. Against Vought as a company, he would be a nightmare, because he would attack exactly where they are most vulnerable: reputation, money, documents, contracts, buried crimes, and scientific secrets. Against the boys, he would be a temporary ally and a moral break. He would help when their goals aligned, but he would fight Butcher if Butcher became a threat. And against Homelander with V1, with no preparation, Batman loses. With real preparation, data on V1, access to Vought's secrets, and enough time to build the battlefield, he would have a serious chance. But that victory would not come from a brawl. It would come from isolation, exposure, strategic manipulation, containment, and science. Batman would not try to prove he is stronger than Homelander. He would try to prove that Homelander was never invincible, and for someone like him, that might hurt more than any physical blow. In the end, maybe Batman could not completely save the boys' universe, because the problem in that world is not just Vought. It is the public that idolizes monsters. It is the media that turns tragedy into product. It is the government that makes deals with evil when it is convenient. It is the culture that confuses power with virtue. Could Batman take down Vought? Maybe. Could he neutralize Homelander? With preparation, there is a path. Could he capture several criminal supes? Probably, but he could not rip corruption out of the entire world in 1 week. Gotham proves that. Batman wins impossible battles, but he lives in a war that never ends. And maybe that is exactly why he would work so well in this universe. Because The Boys is basically Gotham on a corporate and political scale, except instead of clowns, mobsters, and masked killers, you have flying celebrities, secret labs, freedom camps, fanatics, and marketing campaigns. Batman would understand that world way too fast. He would look at the Seven and not see gods. He would see insecure criminals wearing costumes. He would look at Vought and not see an unbeatable company. He would see an organization full of files, accomplices, and weak points. He would look at Homelander with V1 and not see a deity. He would see a product desperate to prove he cannot be discarded. So my final answer is this. Realistically, Batman would not beat the boys if he were thrown headfirst against Homelander with no context. That would be a death sentence. But if he had time to do what he always does, investigate, hide, study, prepare, test theories, and strike at the right moment, he would go further than almost any human in that universe. He would take down lower-level supes. He would create plans for the bigger threats. He would expose Vought. He would clash with Butcher. He would probably partially team up with Starlight and Grace Mallory. He would study Compound V. He would investigate V1. And he would turn Homelander into the main target of a war Homelander does not know how to fight, because Homelander knows how to win through fear. Batman lives inside fear and learned how to use it as a weapon. And that is the difference. In the boys' universe, everyone is used to people who have power and abuse it. But Batman is the opposite. A powerless man walking into a world full of false gods and reminding all of them that power without discipline is just weakness with good publicity. He would not clean up that universe easily. He would not walk away untouched. He would have to adapt, retreat, lose a few rounds, and maybe pay a heavy price. But in the end, if anyone in that world could turn Vought into ruins and make Homelander feel real fear, even after V1, that someone would be Batman. Now I want to know what you think. Am I overhyping him? Would Batman still have a chance against Season 5 Homelander, or did V1 completely change the game? Comment down below and tell me how far you think Batman would realistically get in the boys' universe. And if you want to see more videos putting characters in universes where they absolutely should not be, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which character should be next.